It is Sunday, the 29th of December, 2024. My name is Pigeon Rose, and this is my song of the day. Here we are at the end of our Christmas week, and I'm ending on a depressing note, because I have a lot of Christmas songs I could talk about, but I really love this one, and I'm only doing one Christmas week, so I gotta talk about it. I just love the idea behind it. The song we're talking about today is 7 O'Clock News / Silent Night by Simon and Garfunkel. This was the final track on the album Parsley, Sage, Rosemary and Thyme from 1966, and I don't really want to give away the conceit of this song until after we listen to it, but I will recommend that if you're not already, that you listen to this with good headphones on. It's got like stereo panned elements, so you want to be hearing both of them properly in the right ear, you know. Obviously good speakers works too, but just make sure you're wearing headphones and not just listening to it on a phone speaker or something, you know. There's also a version of it by Phoebe Bridgers, Fiona Apple, and Matt Berninger that I would also encourage you to listen to, but for now, go listen to the Simon and Garfunkel song, and then we'll come back in a few minutes and talk about it. That's the 7 O'Clock News. That was 7 O'Clock News / Silent Night by Simon and Garfunkel. This song, as I'm sure you noticed, is Simon and Garfunkel singing Silent Night while a newsreader reads out news headlines. Simon and Garfunkel are stereo. They're playing in both ears equally. I guess center panned would be the word. The piano is left panned and the newsreader is right panned. And as the song goes on, the guitar gets a bit quieter and the newsreader gets louder. And I love it. I love this idea so much. It's such a great contrast. It's combining Silent Night, the song, as, you know, this expression of love and kindness and Christmas warmth with these headlines, which are largely about quite upsetting political things of the time. I mean, it was 66. A lot was going on back then in America and across the world, obviously, but it's largely about American news. It's not subtle. It's got the subtlety of a hammer, but it's a really effective combination of these things. So I'm not going to read you the lyrics of Silent Night because you know what Silent Night is. But I am going to talk about the newsreader. So the newsreader is Charlie O'Donnell, who was a very famous TV and radio personality. He did game shows. He was a radio disc jockey. He worked on Wheel of Fortune. I mean, he was a big guy in the TV and radio space. And he's the newsreader in this song. Wikipedia lists the things he talks about. A dispute in the House of Representatives over the Civil Rights Bill. It is stated that President Johnson had originally proposed a full ban on discrimination for any type of housing, dismissed as having no chance, and that a compromise was painfully worked out in the House Judiciary Committee. It talks about the death of comedian Lenny Bruce from an overdose of narcotics at the age of 42. Except he actually died at 40, and the song gets that wrong. It gets a few details wrong, which is interesting to me. Martin Luther King Jr. reaffirming plans for an open housing march into Cicero, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. It is stated that Cook County Sheriff Richard Ogilvie urged its cancellation, and that Cicero police plan to ask the National Guard to be called in. The grand jury indictment of Richard Speck for the murder of 8 student nurses. Disruption by protesters at House Committee of Un-American Activities hearings into anti-Vietnam War protests. A speech by former Vice President Richard Nixon to the veterans of foreign wars, which was actually the American Legion, urging an increase in the war effort in Vietnam and calling opposition to the war the greatest single weapon working against the U.S. It really places it in a very specific time when Richard Nixon is referred to as the former Vice President and not the president or former president, you know. Ooh. Anyway, I remember when he wasn't president, good times. Anyway, it's just all of these different things, you know, civil rights, Martin Luther King Jr., Lenny Bruce dying, like a murderer on trial, all of these things. Nixon, Vietnam, the House Un-American Activities. It's a very specific zeitgeist of 1966 playing under and then over Silent Night. So it's like, you know, you're gathered in your homes. It's warm at Christmas time. You're smiling. You're able to ignore the world. But the world is still there and it's getting later and you can't ignore it forever, you know. Now, I mentioned at the start of this that Phoebe Bridgers, Fiona Apple, and Matt Berninger did a version of this song. So in 2019, they released it. It's Phoebe Bridgers and Fiona Apple singing like Simon and Garfunkel with like the harmonies and everything, with Matt Berninger playing the role of the news announcer. And in this instance, I enjoy how instead of piano, it's guitar, and Matt Berninger, even though he's the singer from The National, if you're unaware, but he's doing like, a newsreader voice, and it's him reading out modern headlines, things that were big in December 2019 instead. And what I like about this, it's like when people update We Didn't Start the Fire, although that's not a great example because the Fall Out Boy We Didn't Start the Fire is not great. Maybe a better comparison, weirdly, is That Funny Feeling by Bo Burnham, because that song's only from 2021, but anytime there's like a big influx of things, people will do new versions of it to talk about modern topics. I've seen a lot of versions since the murder of the United Healthcare CEO. A lot of people have been doing stuff about, healthcare being denied and then the guy getting killed. It's a whole thing. I've seen a lot of people including that in their rewrites, and, Trump getting reelected and all that fucking bullshit. America hasn't changed much since 1966, but it's just really interesting to update this song in 2019 and talk about modern politics in the same way the original did. So, Silent Night is obviously unchanged. It's just Phoebe Bridgers and Fiona Apple singing it, and they're both great singers and it sounds lovely. But then the Wikipedia summary of what it's talking about is, the news featured the announcement of a settlement that would not force the Sackler family, owners of Purdue Pharma, to admit wrongdoing in the deaths of hundreds of thousands related to their opioid products, the first all-female spacewalk, the murder of Botham Jean, the Supreme Court hearing the case of a restrictive abortion law from Louisiana, and the testimony of Mick Mulvaney, the first impeachment trial of Donald Trump. So while it's more modern topics, it's not dissimilar in the topics it's covering. I mean, it's talking about government activity and court cases and deaths and murders, and the previous one mentioned President Johnson and Richard Nixon, and this one mentions Donald Trump, of course. It's just, it captures the zeitgeist very well, and I think it's a really cool idea that they did that, and you should listen to it as well if you haven't already, because it's great. Actually, what's the detail I love the most about this? It's exactly the same length as the original song. They're both exactly 2 minutes long. That's great. I don't know why that amuses me so much, but I enjoy that attention to detail. Anyway, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's all these songs are, and they're great, and you should re-listen to them to get the full effect of it with like good headphones and shit. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this song, and indeed this week. Next week is going to be New Year's themed, because of course it is. New Year's is on Wednesday, and so it's going to be a week about changes and renewal and all that jazz. New Year, same podcast. So until then, thank you so much for listening. Please hit like, hit subscribe, leave a comment down below, tell me what you think, tell other people about this show. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Are you going to Scarborough Fair? Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Funny I talk about this a week after talking about Joe Hawley. Anyway,